Yo, what up? This is the Heart to Heart podcast number 6. I'm here talking with Brent Boheme. What's fucking crack-a-lackin', bro?
What's up, dude? It's lit.
Yeah, we are here in the studio, drinking on our beverages, conversating. Earlier today, we were both in the sculpture studio, doing our thing. And we just got to talking. And I was telling Brent about how I've been doing these podcasts. And Brent was like, hell yeah, I'm down.
You know it.
We're here now. Live action. I think, like, as artists, that's just, like, the best thing to talk about is, like, our art and, like, our form of expression. So, like, you make a lot of crazy shit. Like 3D sculpting, like how they did back in, like, the Greek Colosseum and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Colosseum. So, yeah, like, what would you put, like, a lot of kind of, like, very out there, like, it's kind of risque, like a lot of violence in your pieces. And so that could be perceived by a lot of people in a lot of different ways. They could be scared seeing that. They could be like, oh shit, like, the world is ending. If they're on some, like, noob shit, they're gonna see that and they're gonna be like, oh, there's, like, violence is overtaking us and the world is coming to an end.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's definitely one of the things that I am trying to talk about and discuss is just how violence is seen every day by everybody, and just how our perception of violence and what violence really is, and just war has been crafted for us and not by us, and trying to make heads or tails of what we're being told everywhere every day and what really is right and how we should feel about it. Definitely.
Yeah. It brings up, like, a lot of questions with people, like, being at school here. Like, one time you brought in, like, a gun, right? Like, not a real gun, but, like, when you made out of, like, teddy bears and, like, all this, like, linen and stuff. And didn't you have to, like, get, like, some, like, pass with the campus police so you could just like, bring it in the building? Yeah,
so just background, the project was I was going to make kind of a pillow version of a M4 assault rifle. And, it's a very heavily used weapon in the military, and I have an airsoft version of it. So I figured it would be pretty perfect if I took that airsoft gun and just used that as a direct model. And I made a foam skeleton that was pretty much to size, to shape. It was just a foam M4, and I took that and wrapped it in different pieces of cotton and just, like, padded it up like it was a pillow. And I went to Goodwill and got pretty lucky with some finds. I found some, I feel like it rung a bell to me, but I'd never seen one before. It was like a flip book that was, like, Noah's Ark themed, from the Bible. And it was, like, a little cartoon version of Noah and a little cartoon animals, and he was loading them up on the ship. And I just found some other stuff in it that was, like, just good scenery that wasn't necessarily religious. Like, there's one part where there's a dove flying, and there's just some nice scenery of woods and stuff. And I cut it all out, and it was really funny. It just looked like it was meant for it. Like, the way I sewed it up around it, kind of like a really tight shirt for the whole gun, and it had a sleeve over the whole thing that was that had these little cartoon pictures on it, and around the carbine of the gun there was, like, fur that I got off like a toboggan that I had found, and the whole thing was meant to be almost like a stuffed animal M4. And it was hilarious because, like you were just saying, when it was time for me to make the foam version of the rifle, I told my teacher, that I was going to have an airsoft gun that looked like, a very real rifle. It looked very real. I mean, to somebody who didn't see the red tip or know what was going on, they think that I was an open shooter. Mm-hmm. So I was fucking terrified. I thought I was going to get shot on my way to school. So first thing I did was, I had to go to the fucking police station and show them the whole thing up and down, show them how it was unloaded. There was no battery. Tell them, first of all, so here's the thing. To have an airsoft gun legally, carrying it around, it has to have a red tip. It has to be unloaded. and there has to be no battery.
So like if you could bring an airsoft gun on campus.
Well, I'm just saying, like, you
and
know,
not get in trouble if those 3 like criteria were met.
Well, yeah, like, just the nature of it. Like, if you like the campus was a different situation. I'm saying you're just driving down the road with an airsoft gun in your car.
Got you.
You have to have these certain things going on with it, which I think is ridiculous that they even have that. But yeah, even the airsoft gun has to be totally stripped down. And so I went to the police station and showed them. I said, there's no battery, there's no clip, there's a red tip clearly visible. Not to mention the thing doesn't fucking work. Like it broke a couple years ago. That's why I'm bringing it. And even after all that, it took a police escort from the police station with me. He drove me there and then came out and came into the building and watched me put it in a case and lock it, and that was it.
That's insane, man.
Yeah. And even
they're sticking to the rule book on that.
Even with all that, there were still people giving me funny looks when I was working on it. They look over and see this thing, and obviously there's people who are smart and they look right at it and they see the red tip. They say, first of all, it's Brent. Nobody's gonna he's not gonna do that. He's not gonna shoot nobody. But it's like, it's just making that project. Like I didn't know that I was gonna go to Goodwill and find all the imagery that I was gonna put on it. Like I had no idea I was gonna get any of that. And at first it was just about making a foam gun and then figuring it out later. And so that whole experience guided me to where it ended up, like without a doubt. I mean, just seeing everybody's reaction to the possibility of there being a gun around, even with somebody like me who many would call a straight shooter, like it was shocking. It was amazing. It definitely put an impact on me about how we feel about this kind of shit as a society.
Yeah, it's like really stingy when it comes to like a lot of rules. Like I was it was my brother's wedding this past weekend, and we went out to a really nice restaurant for dinner. This was last night, and so we're sitting there, we're ordering our drinks. I'm trying to get a Sierra Nevada IPA. I'm not about the wine. Everybody else is getting wine. I'm looking for that Sierra Nevada. And so I asked the waiter, like, can I get that Sierra Nevada? And he was like, do you have your ID? And I didn't have my ID. And so he didn't serve me. And even when he's putting out, like, the wine glasses for the wine and everything, he didn't even, like, give me a wine glass. And I was like, that's harsh. And so I started talking to my brother, now wives, parents. They're both from Germany. And over there in Germany, you can start drinking at, like, 14. Mm-hmm. And so drinking, like, you just never get asked for your ID. Like, it was like, it's never expected if you are asked for your ID. And, yeah, so they were, like, really surprised that, like, I couldn't have anything to drink, especially since it was, like, this wedding occasion and everything. And, I don't know, that just made me think about, like, what you were, like, both of what you were saying about the gun and that is just, like, sometimes, like, we really need to just, like, trust in other people making, like, good decisions. It's hard to just baby everybody the way through. It's like, oh no, this person might drink this beer I give them, and then go drive into a ditch or something like that. It's like, no, it's like I think it's way better just to think of people as being, like, capable and adults.
Well, I think it's really just a matter of, like, I mean, everybody's just so afraid of what could happen. I mean, if you think about just everything that goes on a daily basis, I mean, either of us, anybody could die at a moment's notice from 100 different things. And, whether or not somebody has a gun in their car or whether or not somebody's, has an ID, it's just like these kind of things, I mean, there's just too much of a fear, just a fear of the unknown. I mean, with guns and everything, like, that's what I really wanted to show is, like, to somebody who, maybe grew up with guns or had them, everywhere and just understands how to use it, understands what they're for. They're not going to be afraid of it. But somebody who, was raised in a place that we're creating, every day is like that guns are, there's no reason to have a gun, and stuff like that. And it's like then suddenly something that we know is not going to go away. Guns aren't going anywhere. I mean, at this point in America, to assume that people aren't going to have guns is like, I mean, most people believe that, if the government is too oppressive, then as an American, it's your duty to rebel and rise up. And at that point, trying to take people's guns away that's where that rebellion would come. I mean, there's just so many people, it would be impossible. And that's what I really wanted to show with that piece and just bring up a conversation about why do we feel this way. I mean, To somebody who knows what they're doing, a gun is the same thing as, a flare or a knife, a pocket knife or something like, or a compass. It's just something that, you're not going to use it every day, but if you need it, then you need it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I mean, do you think that's a waste of time that people are so concerned with, like, whether or not we should crack down on people, like take away or make it harder for people to get guns? I don't. It's like all about, like, when I hear about this shit, I think about, like, where are people putting their focus in this? Is this like a positive direction people are putting their focus in? Because, like, most of the time, I think people should just try to work on themselves, just focus on themselves. How can I live a better life? Not focus on, oh, these people are breaking rules, or we should put rules in place so these people can't do bad stuff. Like, I think it's just totally taking people away from focusing on themselves and trying to just, like, live a good life for themselves, It's like, where do you think people should put their energy and their thought? Like, well, in what direction,
I mean, when it comes to this kind of stuff, gun control and just violence and just the, whether or not what we should be worried about, I just think that, to me, it boils down to, there's different types of people. There's somebody who sees violence and gun control as something that's not right, something that has never happened, or at least it has happened, and that was immature and that was unreasonable, and it needs to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's people who see these kind of things as something that is never going to stop, and they're not afraid of it. And I just think it does get deeper for me when I just think about just think about the global politics. I mean, people talk about all the time, like, little beefs that we have everywhere, and they say that gun control is such a big deal because people are getting raised around warfare, around this idea that war is, like, something that's always going to happen. I mean, video games and movies and everything, and war is just seen as, like, accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't like that, and they're trying to go against that. And somebody like our mutual friend London, like, she doesn't think that there's any reason to have guns, that war is something that we should just move past. And it's like, it's not even about, to me, it really comes down to, like, violence is something that's human nature, and it's never going to go away. And we all feel that. And it's like, you have to either be able to be comfortable with it and accept it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because we live in a luxurious life here in America. We don't, if I don't carry a gun with me everywhere, I'll be fine. I've been fine for years. Nobody's ever tried to shoot me or rob me, and I've been fine. But there is going to be, you never know. And that's the thing. That's where you get caught off guard. If we have an entire society that's based around being afraid of this and being so worried about cracking down on everybody else's guns,
mm-hmm.
then eventually we're going to end up in a place where violence is foreign to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that we don't envision and we can't imagine and we're not worried about. And then, the hard fact is that there's people everywhere who have to live with violence.
Mm-hmm.
Violence is a part of their, they don't get to choose. There's people out there who are 12 years old right now carrying an assault rifle
mm-hmm.
and using it. And, like, that's not something, like, I talk about all this, but I don't even understand. I've never had to defend myself against, for my life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've defended my honor in high school, fought a guy with my hands on some stupid shit, but I've never had to worry about my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real privilege that I have, that we have. I mean, we're white, we're men, we're, like, there's so many other people out there, the majority of the world, that, it's not like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I just think people should worry about, being prepared. That probably goes back to Boy Scouts, but I mean, that's the honest truth.
Were you in Boy Scouts?
Yeah.
Where did you like? What level did you get to?
I didn't get to Eagle. I got to one after first class. I think is life.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't have to do with
Scouts as well.
Yeah.
I think this kind of goes back to some shit we were talking about, like that kind of like discipline-esque type lifestyle. You're talking about going into the Marines. And I think the military would suit me really well, actually. I don't really... it's not for me. Like, I don't agree with certain things that soldiers do have to do. But I don't dislike it. It's just not for me. But I do know that kind of lifestyle would, like, suit me very well. Being on that, like, discipline, that schedule. And, like... I don't know, yeah.
Yeah, I think.
But yeah,
To tie it back to Boy Scouts and that kind of idea, I mean, it's funny that I just think it's a funny example because, I mean, when I say like being prepared for violence and knowing that it's going to happen, that doesn't just necessarily mean like, man on man violence. I mean, that just has to do with instinct. I mean, it's like a fight or flight reaction. Like, to me, it seems that somebody who doesn't believe in war, that's a flight reaction. That's that's not a matter of like who are we defending or why are we fighting, and how do I get away from it. And it's like when it comes to your life, that's like an attitude that you have to have about everything is like fight or flight. Am I gonna just give in and just let things happen around me, or am I gonna get my hands dirty and try to change what's going on? And I think that goes with everything. And like when somebody looks at my sculpture, that's a pillow of a gun. They either look at it and they get repulsed, or they look at it and they get intrigued. Mm-hmm. And I think that has to do with just a lot about who a person is and how I just everything that they I want them to question their own beliefs inside of them.
Yeah,
I want them to question what they're thinking about violence and why they think that.
If you're asking questions like why is Brent making this piece?
That's what I'm saying.
What's the meaning behind this? Like, just making like maybe that's why I get along so well with art folk. It's because like we look deeper into things. Like we don't just look at things at surface level. Like there's not just a piece that like I would see as being ugly or bad, and then a piece that's being good. It's like there's always like something, no matter what. A student could do something that I don't really like jive with. It's not my style or something, but I'm still not gonna like hate on it because it's like it's something to them, and it like was like a part of them they put into making that.
Yeah, I think that's the funny part about art is that some people start with the emotional aspect and they start with the message and they want the message to dictate the piece, and then they build off of that. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes you start the piece and you realize what the message is, and then you go off of that. And I think it's funny to notice how pretty much regardless of which way it goes, you can always learn something based off of somebody, just off of what they're creating. Because you notice that if somebody's doing something and it comes out lousy, it's because they didn't care about it. Mm-hmm. But you notice somebody puts in a lot of effort to them, and a lot of effort into something. It means they believe in it. There's something in it that they feel the need to keep driving. And so when you see somebody's finished artwork and what they're really done with, and what they've they've produced as an individual and they're proud of, that's where you can see the most about them as an artist, and like especially just as an individual. Mm-hmm. Like,
that's dope.
I definitely know that I've had pieces that I've made that have totally just been trash, and I know that I lose motivation halfway through, and even if it's done, it's just because I wanted to learn something about a technique or about how to do something, and I had to do it for an assignment. But I mean, if I look back at all the pieces that I've totally completed and are like done, all of them have something to do with me, like on a much deeper level. Mm-hmm. And it's hilarious how that always works out. I don't know, like
it's like it can't be planned for.
I mean, yeah, it really. I mean, sometimes it just can't be. Sometimes you can try your hardest to plan for it, and it ends up going a totally different direction. Like this newest piece that I'm working on right now, essentially, as you know, it's just a plaster block that I've taken basic tools and just carved away at, and just chipped off pieces of rock and turning it, sculpting it into something that's recognizable. What I'm going for is a hand with a knife in it, just right through the middle, just like right here, like it was stabbed in the table. And the hand's flat, and it's cut off at the wrist, and it's on a base, and that's it. And when I drew that, I'll be honest with you, it took me about 5 seconds. I could show you the sketches in my book. I mean, it just like came out. It just like my mind just spit it out, and there it was. And for some reason, I had probably 3 ideas before that, and as soon as I pumped that one out, it was it. I mean, one little cheesy sketch, and that's like I was decided, and I started. Mm-hmm. And to me, it was just like, I really couldn't tell you why I'm carving this, but to me, it's kind of interesting, and I think it would be fun to see, done. Yeah. And the more I get onto it, get into it and get it done, and the more that you and me have conversated about it, I end up realizing that before, I mean, this thing is like a roadmap to my subconscious right now, and it's telling me all this shit about myself that I didn't even know.
So good.
And as soon as I start thinking about it, you know, I'm seeing aspects of my own, like, just crazy shit that I didn't expect to come out at all. Mm-hmm. And it's like now I'm thinking about all these things, and I'm getting, you know, themes and shit in my head, and it's like it's just interesting to see that happen. The same thing happened with the gun. I didn't really expect it to be anything fun. You know, when I started, I was just like, fuck it, you know, I got this airsoft gun that I'm getting ready to throw away. Might as well fuck around and make a foam version and see what happens. And next thing you know, it ends up being one of my only, you know, presentable, well done pieces. And it's just
really
surprising.
Dope. It's really dope. Yeah, man. It seems like all the fellow artists here like have some type of niche where it's like something pulls them in, and I can't really think of a single person I don't like associate with one type of creation. You know, it might be with a lot of fabrics and weaving and geometric patterns and stuff, or it could be, you know, with metal and
totally,
you know, loving like the welding and all that. I mean, it's like there's always some pull. It's hard for me to really even describe what my pull is, because I feel like I'm figuring it out. But I'm sure to people looking at from the outside, they're seeing like, oh, like a bunch of this. He's made a bunch of conceptual stuff, and there's like a moving parts and like this human interaction. You know, it's like, but it's like still, it's like I couldn't just describe myself as that right away. I mean, it's weird. Do you feel like you kind of understand like your artist niche, like what you do best? Like, do you feel like you kind of know what that is, or are you like exploring and still learning about like where you want to go with art?
Well, I think without a doubt going to college has been a great experience for that, just because, you know, I'm forced to do art, not only in terms of a medium that I might not be fond of, but also just like topics that, you know, they craft a guideline for you, and you have to find your own creative project within those guidelines. I mean, some people might kind of see that as just, you know, some people don't like that kind of thing, but to be honest, you know, as much as I haven't liked it or have liked it, it's benefited me completely. I mean, when I actually left high school, I was all 2D. I'd never done a sculpture. I had only painted and drawn. And by the time I was done with high school, I had just totally burned myself out on painting, just because the nature of the class that I was in, we were always behind. We were always pushed for time. And my paintings went from big paintings that I really enjoyed to tiny paintings that I was just crunching out. And it totally killed painting for me. I mean, by the end of it, I didn't like painting anymore. And I'd rushed out so many ideas.
Taking the fun out of the creative process.
Yeah.
Being in that,
I mean, they totally, I mean, it's just
atmosphere.
I mean, it helped me learn how to pump out work, you know. It might not be my best, but, you know, you get something on paper. That it helped me with that. But all in all, you know, it was a good experience, but near the end, I really didn't benefit. You know, in the beginning, I definitely benefited. I mean, that's where high school is obviously where I learned all my technique and everything. But, you know, near the end, it got redundant. It just didn't, it wasn't the same. When I got to college, you know, and I started being pushed into, you know, a bunch of different, like I said, mediums and techniques and stuff, it definitely became easy for me to identify a niche. I think right now, just the subtractive process of stone carving is really just where I find myself. You know, I mean, I've done, you know, sculptures in different mediums and whatnot, and I've definitely, by the end of a plaster project, it's easy to want to just say fuck plaster. I mean, I've definitely done it. Like at the end of I carved a snake out of plaster, and by the end of the snake, it was time to take a break on that. Like it was ready to do something else. But at the same time, I think the real thing that I'm taking away is just technique, where, you know, I excel. Like, I think that, you know, everybody has an area, whether they know it or not, that they will just have a natural talent at. Mm-hmm. Some people, it has to do with artistic technique, just knowing how to organize things and knowing how to please the eye and, you know, please the brain. Mm-hmm. And for some people, it's just how to do something, you know, like how to, you know, weld or how to woodwork or, you know, something like that. And it's like, I think that's where people really settle in, like, but, you know, that's weird. But because, you know, I always find myself going back to 2D, you know, doing 3D for however long and then dabbling in 2D. It's like whether I like it or not, I always end up dabbling in other things.
Yeah.
So I don't think a niche, I don't think a niche has to be permanent, but I definitely think everybody has one.
Yeah, I used to like judge myself so hard for like having so many different interests.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I just wanted to settle in and things to be like simple in that way. Be like, oh yeah, I really like tennis. And I just love playing tennis, and I just continually get something out of playing tennis. It's like it's not been that way for me at all.
Yeah.
Like, have you had things that you've like stuck with, hobbies and interests and things like that, or have you like really like would you say jumped all over, like just continually tried different stuff?
I gotta be honest, I think the most consistent thing in my life for probably the past 6 years has been weed. And that's about it, dude. I mean, when it comes to art, hobbies, interests, everything is totally fucking changed.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. I mean, since I was in high school, I don't know. It sounds corny, but I feel like I'm a fucking different person. Totally new person. I mean, like I said, when I was in high school, I was painting and longboarding, and that was like it. And, I mean, I don't know. I think once I found drugs, that just became the only consistent thing. Mm-hmm. And from there on, everything else changed around it. And that's pretty sad, but I mean, I think that's all too often you see that in artists is just drug use, at least. Like,
oh yeah, it's so huge in like the artist culture. Even like comedians go fucking hard. Like they're artists in their own way, and they go fucking hard. I mean, we're shown in music all the time.
Yeah,
like the drugs and like just all the kind of things that happen from taking drugs and like.
But that's the thing, that makes me curious, like, I'm not sure if it's because of weed or not, but, I've definitely, like, I would say that weed participated in making me lose interest in painting, just because it got to the point where, I was always high when I was painting, and I got to the point where I'd rather just get high, and the painting part just got boring. And it was like, it was always something that I didn't want to do when I was high, and so, I just lost interest in that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's easy to just smoke and do art, but I think smoking and just anything that comes in that's not from you is going to change you over mm-hmm. time. And I think I like just my difference in art can be traced to drugs in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I would say.
I've been rather conflicted with all that for a long time. My dad just like made some very questionable things as far as how he drank alcohol. I mean, he's like alcoholic, fancy way of saying alcoholic. And so it changed how I perceived a lot of kind of like drugs, mind-altering substances and all that. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder how that really has changed how I view all of that. I think there is some type of like addictive personality that is traced through my genes. My dad talks about his dad, and then his granddad, my great granddad. Like there's been some kind of like addictive behaviors.
Oh yeah.
Seen through there. But the whole perception of it, I just don't know if that really benefits me, knowing that like, I kind of in a way would just rather figure things out for myself and be like, all right, yeah, this just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Or
definitely. And I think that especially hard drugs will do that. I mean, we're both in college. We see it every day, like things that are like hallucinogens, mm-hmm. Just acid and LSD and all the generic stuff. I mean, that kind of thing can change everything that you think about. Like, I mean, I came to college pretty much ready to be an art major, and then went to something else, and went to something else, and then here I am back at art. Mm-hmm. And it's like I can trace all these life changes to all kinds of different things, but it's like the only thing that's been consistent is a couple of different drugs, and just I don't know, it's weird because even though I've had all these different changes in what I'm interested in art and my mediums and techniques and all these things, I have kind of noticed just a strange theme build like over the years. And it's just been like, it's almost like you can just tie it to big, emotion. Just like one emotion, I have like a series off it that I didn't even realize that I'd put together. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to think about how all the things that go on in your mind subconsciously when you're an artist, that, you're just trying to live your everyday life and do art and be creative and be inspired. the things that end up inspiring you, it's just, you can never anticipate it. Like when I was in high school and I was painting, the theme that I was going for was just fear, and just, trying to discuss fear and just what it was, and, like make people, in all honesty, like my goal was to make people feel fear. I wanted my art to make people afraid. And what I did was I had these big 4x4 paintings that were, I chose different phobias based off that, just for each piece. I had one that was like a phobia of dogs, phobia of spiders, of planes, of just, everyday normal thing that people are always afraid of. And I tried to blow it up huge and draw it as scary as I could get it. Like for dogs, I drew like a borderline wolf that was, growling and freaking out. And I had, for the spider, I had a giant spider on there. And I did one I did snakes. I still have that one in my house. It's the only one I actually still have. But I did a coiled up snake, which later inspired a carving. But during the time, I told myself that I had a theme, but really I was just doing what I wanted. I was just thinking, like, if I can make some shit that's scary and, just big and blow it up, like, I think personally I'm just going to think it's cool. And so, I'll come up with a bullshit theme, but I'm just doing what I want. And, I'm not trying to be my own psychiatrist, but, like, you get done with it all. Like, years later I look back and I see all this shit and I realize that, in my everyday life I was feeling fear. I was afraid all the time. Like, I was afraid to go to college. I was afraid for high school to be over. I was afraid with personal shit that was going on in my life with my family. I was afraid for I was afraid of everything. And I tried to act really tough, but it's easy to see that I was afraid. And that, like, just comes through me, that just came through me subconsciously. And, here I am in college and, I'm starting, or maybe not starting, but I'm kind of in the groove of, anger right now. Like, I was fear, and I transitioned to kind of anger, where all my pieces are now related to, like, violence and weapons and pain. And I didn't see that coming. Like, it wasn't anything that I planned on. Like, I didn't, part of me thinks, that's kind of cool, but why do I think that's cool? Like, I asked myself, like, I'm drawing pictures of dudes holding guns, and I'm making foam guns, and I got a guy getting stabbed in the hand, and all these things to me are just like manly things that, hell yeah, that's cool. Like, I like it, but really what's going on here? Like, yeah. And I think about it and I am fucking angry, like, all the time. I mean,
What do you think, like, sparks your anger?
That's a good question, dude. You tell me. I mean, it's just a lot of things. I just think that right now I'm just so disappointed with society. I don't know. I consider myself an American.
Yeah, very. I guess gotta chime in here. Like, when I first started at Warren Wilson, my freshman year of college, like, I was like pretty fucked up off of this realization that like, people are just out to do their own thing. It's not about, like, everybody watching each other's back and, like, really going out of your way to be kind and all this kind of stuff. And since then I've realized there are a lot of good people out there, most certainly, but there's, like, this underlying reality of things to where, like, we can talk as much about, like, loving our community and all this stuff and living in a community, but still it's like those individual families matter more. Like, yeah, it's kind of like this instinct that we all have to other. It's like there's me and then there's you. It's not like our and us.
Yeah. I don't know.
I guess it was that realization that I had going to Warren Wilson, and especially because I came from a small town, Hendersonville. I knew, like, a bunch of the people that, like, I knew very well, people I had grown up with, and I was, like, a part of that, like, tight-knit group. And so, yeah, going away to college, even though it wasn't far away from Hendersonville, it was with a bunch of new people. I didn't, like, know anybody from high school, and, like, nobody went there. And so, yeah, it was just crazy to kind of have that realization, like, this is how people actually are. This is, like, the real world, Yeah. In a way, I hope it hasn't made me cold in any way, where I'm like, I don't have as high, like, ideals as I once did for how we can act. But, like, at the same time, there's something very, like, relieving and calming to me to know, like, this is just a pattern of, like, who we are. It's like I and you, we other each other, and, like, you know, how do we deal with that? Do we just wish it was differently, or do we make an effort in our everyday living to think a little bit less about ourselves and more about like, this is our show right now. It's not like my show, where it's not, you know,
well, I don't know, man. I mean,
supposed to be
that's
like
tough,
a mutual
though.
thing.
I mean, that's a tough topic, because, I mean, when it comes to, you know, community success versus individual success, you know, you're never going to be able to convince people that the community success is more important than their own. Mm-hmm. That's just human nature. I mean, we're talking about, you know, fight or flight responses earlier. I mean, that boils down to shit that's in our genes that we can't control, you know, just as humans. I mean, you know, a human's going to feel the urge to pass their genes on and to do it with the most, you know, everybody wants to be an alpha. That's just in your genes, is to be an alpha, you know. And some people are, you know, they don't feel that way. They, you know, the whole beta discussion and all that shit. But like, there are certain things that a person's going to always try to do to better their own life, you know. And those things boil down to just, you know, it's all kinds of things. But you know, people are never going to be able to put their own success below community success, and that's the problem. Mm-hmm. I mean, and for me, it was strange because, you know, I was kind of raised in the South, you know, and I had some people in my life who were very Southern, you know, very manly men, you know, masculine, like, just, they didn't really see things any other way than the way they did. And then, you know, to them it was like, you know, you have to work hard, mm-hmm. you have to make money for your family and for you, you know, just certain things that, you know, kind of get lost in translation nowadays. I mean, just, you know, the things that we see at UNCA that people consider to be important, you know, it all comes down to, I think, just personal issues. It's nothing that, you know, I just think there's so many people prepared to waste their time on things that don't matter. Yeah. And they try to act like it's a community problem, but it's really a personal problem. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think
that's insane, man. That's like, yeah, that one concept, like, if we all understood that fully, like, that would change all of our lives so drastically that it's like it's so easy to be like, this isn't my problem, this is something else's problem that's having an issue. Like, problems come from the outside in. It's not that the problems come from the inside out, you know? Mm-hmm. And yeah, I just think that's like, if only I could truly understand. Like, that's something I'm working on, is trying to understand how I can actually take like control over things that I do. And it's not that like I'm making an excuse as to why I feel a certain way. Yeah. But yeah, I really dig that.
I don't know, man. I think I just think I'm just so disappointed in the shit that people think is worth our time, you know? Mm-hmm. I mean, I just, you know, like for instance, you know, the military is at a crisis right now just because they can't find anybody. They can't recruit anybody. There's nobody who's not smoking weed. There's nobody who's, you know, can pass the physical exams. Like, nobody is able to be in the military. And it's just because people...
I haven't really heard about that.
I mean, yeah, I heard about it on another podcast that I was watching. It's just like, the military's at a crisis. Recruiter can't find anybody. And it's like, it's just, there's a gradual change over time in the things that people consider to be important. I mean, you know, in 1940, you wouldn't have to tell anybody to work out. You know, you wouldn't have to tell anybody that being obese wasn't okay. You wouldn't have to say anything about just all kinds of fucking things that we have to talk about today. I mean, just, you know, without taking a stance on it, like just gender fluidity, mm-hmm. all this shit. I mean, I just feel like there's so many more important things that we need to be discussing right now. Yeah. And to see so much of our time and effort and criticism go towards people for things that, you know, don't fucking matter. Mm-hmm. Like,
dude, the discussion we should be having is why we are so disappointed in society and others. Like, that's way more important and that affects us way more than whoever we vote for like our governor or anything. Like that's some like, and it's harder to understand. You know, it's harder for people to understand that if they want to change the world, then it starts with them changing personally, because that's a lot of responsibility and it's really hard.
Yeah.
And just I mean, what you're saying though, about just like being disappointed in society. I mean, it's really changed how I think and how I behave.
I just think there's a lot of things that come subliminally with just everything. You know, people being afraid of masculinity. That's a big issue that I'm seeing, and that's one of the kind of things that I'm trying to get at with my art right now, is that people are just afraid of things that, you know, as hard as they may be, they're part of us. They're part of our life. I mean, you know, like we're so privileged, everybody. I mean, to live in the country we do.
The other way of thinking about that, is to be like, no, I don't know. I don't even want to go there. But yeah.
I kind of want to smoke another joint.
Yeah, I'm baked as hell.